Good morning, faithful people of God. It's good to join in worship in a spirit of togetherness, even while we are apart physically. It's good to have these means to be able to do that, and I know many of you are sheltering in place, venturing out only when you really need to. I know some of you have gone to be with family. We are learning, all of us, that our connections with one another and with God are not dependent on being in the same place at the same time. We are learning that the bonds of Christian affection transcend time and space, just as the love of God does. I pray that you are well and that you're keeping your spirits up in spite of the hardships that all of us are going through. The benefit of faith is that it does not allow us to become isolated. Through prayer, through ties of friendship, through caring for one another, through belief in God's immanence in creation, we know that we are not alone. We are held in a divine mystery that is larger than all of us. We are bound up in an eternity that has no constraints of time or space. God is with us through these days. Today's gospel story is a familiar story of the raising of Lazarus. It's known as a sign story, meaning that it reveals truths about God's glory and presence in the world through the ministry of Jesus. Another distinguishing feature of sign stories is that Jesus acts in his own time, and not according to external pressures. For this reason, when we hear that Jesus stayed where he was for 2 days after hearing about Lazarus' illness, we should not be that surprised. Still, Martha, her sister Mary, and their brother Lazarus were like family to Jesus. Verse 5 even says clearly that Jesus loved them. He spent time with them whenever he went through the little village of Bethany. So we understand the grief that the sisters, Mary and Martha, felt when their brother died and Jesus hadn't come yet. Each of them, in their turn, says to Jesus, in fact, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." You can hear the anguish in their voices. Let me take you now into the story from the perspective of Martha, as told through an imaginative narrative by Virginia Stem Owens. After that last breath has rattled in his throat, Martha sits there holding the limp hand, feeling it grow cold as the fever drains away. She stares at her brother's body. This can't be happening. The rabbi promised. She believed. Her eyes are wide open and dry as dust, betrayed by a promise, bereft of her brother. Like a sleepwalker, she gets up and leaves the room to start hunting for the necessary supplies: linen cloth, spices, a board on which to straighten the body. The law, she knows, requires that Lazarus be buried before nightfall. Martha moves like an automaton through that day and the next and the next. She lowers all their beds to the floor, the traditional sign of mourning, and accepts the food her neighbors bring in. A good thing, too, because the house soon fills with mourners, and for once, Martha does not feel like cooking. She doesn't feel like doing anything, in fact. It takes all her self-control to face the long week of official mourning and the curiosity seekers it brings from Jerusalem. She's thankful that custom requires her to sit on the floor, her head covered with a shawl. That way she can avoid answering their questions. Nevertheless, she can't escape hearing their whispers among themselves. Didn't they send for that wonder worker they're so crazy about? Isn't he supposed to be a big friend of theirs? Doesn't he stay here every time he's in town? I wonder why he didn't come. Where is he anyway? Their questions are like hot knives through Martha's heart because they are her questions too. The very protest she silently puts to the absent rabbi again and again in her head. But nowhere, not in her heart, nor in her head, nor in the deafening silence, can she hear an answer. I trusted him, and he failed me, she keeps thinking. That's what I get for depending on someone else. I should have taken care of it myself. Found a doctor, maybe in Jerusalem. But no, I believed the message he sent. And now there's no undoing what's happened. Lord, if you had been here, our brother would not have died. But we ran out of time. Thomas Long picks up the story from here. He says, and it was right then, when the world felt it had run out of time, that Jesus said, it is time to go in. This is not about death. This is about the glory of God. It is not about Lazarus who has run out of time. It is death that has run out of time. What I think that means, he says, for us, is that at least in a theological sense, if we are going to be disciples of Jesus, we are going to have to throw our wristwatches and our other time-keeping devices and smartphones away, because Jesus will not participate in an alienated, atheistic, anxiety-ridden world that does not have God and that believes that hope and life and justice are running out of time. He stands before every tomb and says, I am the Lord of time. Come out, Lazarus. Come out. The core theme of this gospel story, even more than Jesus' love, compassion, and vulnerability, is his defiance of death. Jesus does not just raise Lazarus from the grave, he mocks the grave in his almost blasé attitude toward the last enemy. He says, this illness does not lead to death, and then he waits 2 days before setting out for Bethany, refusing to let death set his agenda. Later, but before he goes to Lazarus' tomb, he declares to Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. It is this affirmation that needs to be spoken in our moment of time. Jesus Christ is resurrection and life for the world. In stark relief to the cultures of death that bombard us in the 24/7 news cycle, war zones struggling to protect even innocent civilians, violence against the stranger and alien in our own land, mass shootings and the quickly forgotten will to address reasonable gun control measures, and slowness, bickering, and carelessness in addressing the pandemic's march across the globe. Jesus represents a defiance of death and insistence on life in the face of all of this. This is especially meaningful and relevant for us today as we continue to weather the storms of change and uncertainty. It can be frightening to go through days where nothing seems the same, nothing feels recognizable, and it all seems unreal. The stress of financial worries is here for most of us. Helping our children continue to learn and to feel safe is weighing on many parents right now. Our concerns to protect those who are older or who are compromised in health in some way never let up. The isolation from friends and loved ones begins to take a toll. These are all potentially death-dealing conditions, and in the midst of them, we need a hopeful, life-affirming word. John Pavlovich wrote a column a week ago titled, Dear America, I Know You're Scared, to reflect on a reporter's recent question to the president about what he would say to Americans who are scared right now. Here's part of what John wishes the president had said. You're not alone. You're not, friends. That's what I want you to know more than anything right now. I want you to know that every single human being who calls this place home is facing something they've never faced before. Every one of us is fighting back the encroaching fears and tapping into their deepest reserves and trying to adjust and wait and help and fix and to make sense of all of this senselessness. It may not solve any of the real or imagined terrors you're contending with, but there is strength in the solidarity of this sadness. There is comfort to be found in the affinity we feel right now. There is encouragement waiting in our shared sorrow. The separation we feel is only a myth, because though we are physically apart right now, we are together in this terrifying moment. I know you're scared, America, because I'm scared too. But I also know who we are. I know what we're made of. I know our disparate, glorious beauty that is rising in these hours. I know that people of faith, morality, conscience, and goodness will always transcend the dire circumstances they find themselves in. I know that we can appeal to our better nature right now, that we outgive and outshare and outlove this unthinkable nightmare, that we will reach into a deeper place of humanity, and that we will unearth something glorious, the America we can and will be. If we stay connected to one another, and we let compassion lead us now, one day soon we will wake in the morning to a different world than the one we closed our eyes to. It will not be this terrible day. We will breathe and embrace and love and dream and do all the things that right now we fear that we will never do again. Yes, be scared, but be greatly encouraged. The radiant dawn of this terrifying night is coming, so hold on. According to the Romans reading, the Spirit of Christ dwells in us. The gospel reading reminds us that Christ's Spirit defies death and claims life for himself, for his friends, and for this world. When each of us awakens each morning, we are like Lazarus, given the gift of yet more life. Such a parallel should invite us to remember that our waking is a gift, a grace for which we are rightly thankful. It invites the very question that led to traditions about Lazarus' later life, namely, just how are we to spend the Lazarus life we are given upon waking? The very giftedness of this life, precious and undeserved as it is, even in these troubling times, makes a claim upon us to use that gift well. Use it compassionately. Use it generously. Use it freely. Use it lovingly and kindly for the benefit of everyone around us. One day a child was running down the hall at church on the last day of Bible school. He had in his hand a little ceramic tray that he had made for his mother. He had worked on it all week. As he ran down the hall to give it to her, he dropped it and broke it into 1,000 pieces, and the child began to cry. Everybody was trying to comfort him. They said it was just a tray, but the child was inconsolable. Finally, his mother came on the scene. She said to her child, "Let's pick up all the pieces, and we will take them home and put it together and see what we can make out of it." That is what God is like. God understands when and how it hurts to be human. When our lives are shattered, Christ helps us pick up the pieces, and together we make something out of the brokenness. God cares for you. Christ dwells in you. The Holy Spirit breathes life and hope into you this very day. May all who have ears hear what the Spirit says to the church. Amen.